Welcome. My name is William Messakar. I am a master model railroader in the 4th Division of the Pacific Northwest region of the National Model Railroad Association. I want to welcome all of you to the virtual layout tour we'll have presented today by members of the NMRA. We would encourage you to find out about the NMRA and join in order to participate in these virtual tours. We have other virtual clinics and other activities for the National Model Railroad Association that we think you'll find a big help to your modeling, and you'll get to meet model railroaders just like you. So welcome to our tour, and I hope you enjoy it.
Ray lives up in Linwood, and I guess I'll just let you introduce yourself and your background and give us a tour.
Okay. Russ, beautiful railroad. I really enjoyed seeing that.
Thank you, Ray.
I've been a railroader since I was a little kid, a model railroader. Of course, started with Lionel like most kids did in the 50s, and moved to HO scale, which I modeled primarily most of my life. And in the 1990s, I built a garden railroad using aluminum rail and hand laid on wood ties. A lot of work. It was a battle to keep things running, fighting corrosion and the dirt and slugs and what have you. And I used PSI's Dynatrol system for train control. It worked fairly well. My wife's hobby at the time was AKC breeder. She bred beagles. And one day when I was at work at the Burlington Northern, her male beagle completely tore my garden railroad out of the yard. Left it in 6-foot chunks laying everywhere. So that was enough. I shelved that idea for a long time and continued with HO railroading. But about 3 years ago, Gary Jordan called me in January of 2017 and said, hey, I've got a G scale climax that I'd like to take over to Dave Goodson's and run. Would you like to go? And I said, you betcha. And it was raining that day. And Gary and I had a wonderful time. We were the only ones running trains there, and the rest of them were in the shack drinking hard liquor and smoking cigars. So in spite of having to wear raincoats and endure the elements, we had a very good day. And needless to say, the hook was set in my jaw again. And then a month or 2 months later in March, he called me again. I had given him a Bachmann 3-truck Shay and said, why don't you put radio equipment in this too? So we went back in March, and it was raining again. And just like the first time, we were the only ones running a train. But that's all it took. And I was ready to construct another garden railroad. And a friend of mine here in Linwood had about 500 feet of Aristocraft brass code 332 track in his yard. And he was ready to get rid of it because he was going to sell his house. And he offered it to me at a really, really good price. So I bought it, and away I went. So in April of 2017, I began to build another garden railroad here. Nothing fancy, down and dirty, right on the ground, ballasted track every year, by the way. You have to redo some. Nothing fancy. I use CVP's AirWire 900 radio control system with lithium-ion batteries. I do have 3 train order stations with 3-color light order boards and a dispatcher's panel in the shop to control that. We run primarily by verbal train orders, and main thing is just having fun. I adopted a similar operating system to Jack Tingstad's, where I use scenario cards that describes your train job and what kind of consist you should have and where to spot the cars and pull cars when you go out on a run. We run 2 local freights that are turns, and we have a pair of passenger trains that run on a timetable schedule. 2 railroads I really loved. I lived in southeastern Pennsylvania for a year, and I got to really love the Strasburg Railroad and the way they ran their operation. So I've patterned it kind of that way, where the passenger trains meet in the middle and run to each end and then come back. Another railroad that I fell in love with was the FF&W in Maine, the 2-foot narrow gauge, and they're great. I got a neighbor doing something here. I'm outside with the railroad, by the way. And I love their operations and their little thorny engines I have. So that's what I patterned this railroad after. I've taken lots of videos. I use a digital camera, and I have a small, it's like a GoPro, but it's not a GoPro. My son has 2 GoPros, and you'll see a video later that we spent, it's last month's op session here, and he recorded it with 2 GoPro cameras, and I had about 3 hours worth of film to edit and find the best scenes. But I can't think of anything else right now to say, so I'll just run the video. It's about 18 minutes long, and it's a succession of 4 short videos put together.
Hey, Ray, do you want to say something about those flickering lights?
Yeah, that has something to do with the digital camera and a sampling rate. And it usually happens when the lights are dimmed, the headlights. Sometimes the order board signals look like they're flashing too. This is a 3% grade from the Drainfield Station up to Mount Zion. There's another subdivision that cuts off right there, right here where the train is now. It's a 4.5% grade, and it's a line that runs up and then through a trap door into the shop. And I have some storage tracks indoors.
How many of these cars did you custom paint?
All but the ones with the cream trim around the windows. They're painted in Pensy Brunswick green. There's the line that goes up into the shop.
That's a 4% grade?
It's 4.5%, yeah.
Yeah.
The railroad climbs from Sandhop Crossing, which is the lowest point down near Jericho, to about 50.5 inches higher up at Mount Zion.
Did you build these? Ray, did you build these turnouts?
Most of them, yes, most of them are handmade, and including that three-way there. I cut the lumber on the table saw for the ties. And it takes me a day to build one.
How about the bridges?
The bridge is also built by me, cut out all the parts, and it has brass truss rods and threaded rods with nuts on the end. It's pretty strong. Dog and cat walk over it all the time.
Yeah.
I've built to date 20 turnouts. That's the lowest point right there where it goes through the gate. And it's a 1% grade from there up here to the siding at Drainfield. That's me and my brother Bob.
Oh yeah. How do you attach the rails to the ties?
On the turnouts, I spike them by hand with half-inch spikes. The switch throws are just sliding bolt gate latches, and I cut a groove around the end of them. That fits a brass wire bent over and then down to the mechanism. That's how they're squirrel-proof. On my first railroad, I used Ozark Miniatures switch stands, and they were beautiful, but the squirrels and other animals just tore them to pieces. This little stretch here from Santa Crossing up to the junction there is 2% grade. I mean, you can look at your yard and think it's flat, but boy, when you start engineering track, you find out it's not so flat. This is Gary Jordan's 3-truck shay.
How long is the battery life?
Can usually run about 4.5 to 5 hours before it needs a charge. It just depends on how much work you're doing with them. And I don't run the smoke units because that really gobbles up the batteries in a hurry.
Do you fluorescent or LED lighting on this?
Everything has LEDs.
No, I meant the
I
layout
have
lighting.
three. I got the neighbor running a wood chipper, so it's kind of hard to hear. There's three cables of 5-conductor wire that run the length of the railroad, but they're just for building lights and to run the order board. There's no track power at all. I use Bondo in the frogs too when I make the switches. I use Bondo to fill in the frogs. I can accommodate 4, maybe to 6 operators maximum at an off section. Usually about 4 is about right. Occasionally we'll double up the crew and have an engineer and a conductor.
Can you say something about the ballast, using that ballast car for ballasting, and what's underneath the ties in your tracks?
Yeah, that is a side dump that I built by scratch from plans for a Florence and Cripple Creek side dump car. It was built by their shops, and it's cut out of white oak. And the details like stirrups and grab irons and things are from Ozark Miniatures. And it has a set of Bachmann trucks. And the linkages and latches and things were scratch built out of brass. It was a lot of work.
And how do you do you tamp the ballast under the ties, or are they on a base?
Yes, the ballast is probably in most spots a 1/2 inch thick under the track. It's stamped in. In fact, I just got 3/4 of a yard, 1/4 inch minus Thursday. You use a lot of ballast.
Yeah. Does anyone have any questions for Ray?
I had a question concerning the video. What do you use to edit the video?
I use Microsoft Movie Maker. That's what I do my video editing with.
Go ahead, Jack.
Hey, Ray, I'm really interested in your hand laid or your hand built track and turnouts. You built that 3-way?
Yes, I did. I downloaded a plan. I think it's a micro engineering 3-way, I think.
Okay.
Anyway, I just downloaded the plan and then they enlarged it to G scale and made a full-size template.
Okay. Have you done any diamonds or crossings or anything like that?
Not in G scale, but I have an HO.
Okay. I think I got enough already. Thank you.
Okay. The locomotives are kind of interesting. The biggest one I have for my narrow gauge is a Bachmann Spectrum C19 That engine and tender weighs 17.5 pounds. So these are not lightweights. The little Forneys weigh about 12 pounds, a little over 12.
Do you have one there? You can show us the inside of the electronics?
Yes, I do. This is one of the Forneys here.
Oh, almost lost the caboose.
And most of the electronics fit inside the tender bunker. I don't know if you can see that very well, but inside there is the lithium-ion battery, which just sits in a little box so it doesn't rattle around. It has a quick disconnect, a JST plug. And the electronics, if you can see them there, that is what what CVP calls a converter. And it receives the radio signal and then passes on the information to the DCC module, which is a Soundtrack's Tsunami 2, the big one that's rated for 4 amps. It's down inside the firebox of the engine. So this one's easy to get to the battery if need be, and some of the others are a little more difficult. Like the C19, you have to take the tender body off to get to the battery. But it doesn't, for charging, I don't know if I can do this, but I set them all up. So I don't know if you can see it or not, but there's a phono plug port right there. On the other side is a toggle switch. You flip it forward, that turns on power to the engine, and back is for charging. You plug them in. It takes usually about 3 or 4 hours to recharge them a day. It's simple. If you can hook up DCC and regular model trains, these are no problem. You got a lot of room. My cabooses all have 9-volt batteries and LED lit marker lamps. I also added working classification lights to all the engines that didn't have them. The C19 came with them, the Forneys did not. The controllers, they sell 2 kinds. This is called their T5000. And with their system, you have to have at least this one, because this will do all the programming of the converters and the decoders and everything. They also sell this one, which is a little cheaper. It's called an ops throttle. And it's just a basic operating throttle. You don't have any programming ability with that. This one's neat though, because it has an inside lithium-ion battery, which is rechargeable. These use a pair of AAA batteries, which are replaceable. But the batteries last a long, long time. I have what's called a snake eye camera. I can put this right here.
That's great.
And it shoots out of an open window, and it looks like you're a brakeman riding along in the caboose. Takes some kind of interesting videos.
That's great.
Here's the simple bolt latch like you'd see on a gate or something, a small gate. And just cut a groove right around the end of it there. I used the Unimat lathe to do that. And the squirrels can't tear those apart.
Ted wants to know how many cells are the batteries, and are they balance charged?
Most of my engines have their 4-cell, 14.8 volts, 3,400 milliampere hour. I do have one locomotive with a 6-cell that's a 6,800 milliampere hour. They're usually good for 4 to 5 hours of operating. The charger I use is automatic. When it reaches full charge, then it just switches to a maintenance charge until you take it off. I think the charging rate is 2 amps. They also make a 1 amp charger.
He says the voltage of each cell is monitored.
Yes, yes, it is.
My question, Ray, is what are you planning to do indoors in the future with this layout?
Oh, I want to add another yard area, and a nice engine facility inside the shop. What I have now is just a track on a shelf where I have to charge the engine. It's right over my workbench, which is handy, but I need something nicer inside to keep the engines. And so when you have to pick them up, they are pretty fragile because they're heavy and they have detail parts all over the place on them, brake rigging and everything. It's easy to damage them.
Right. Ray, this was excellent. I think at this point we can end the tour.
Hello again. This is another reminder that this virtual layout tour has been brought to you by members of the 4th Division of the Pacific Northwest region of the National Model Railroad Association. And we hope you've enjoyed it. And we want to encourage you to, again, find out about the NMRA online. Both PNR and NMRA have an excellent website where you can get information about joining and participating in this and other activities like our clinics that are held all over the region. So thank you for joining us today and wish you great modeling.